Hi everyone, welcome to this edition of The Elevator, which, as you know, it's about people who've managed to elevate themselves, oftentimes against the odds for whatever reason, and who are elevating and helping elevate others in our communities. And I've got Chanda, Pandya with me today, who I've known for, I think, over a decade now. She gets younger as the years go by, and I definitely get older. Now, Chanda, you've worked in some of the most toughest sectors of the economy, specifically, and the time we're recording this, this sector is suffering a lot, which is retail. Okay, you've worked in retail. You've had very senior roles in retail at some of the big names. Okay. You've also had to hire and fire people in that capacity. What's your advice at the moment in these kind of sectors, or generally where people actually are losing their jobs, they're worried about their futures? What do you have to say to them? And tell us a bit about how you got into such senior positions, given that, you know, like me, you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth, just a regular person. How did you manage to get there? And what's your advice to people?
Well, first of all, I started in the world of fashion, and you can imagine when I told my parents I wanted to go to London College of Fashion and do a fashion degree, it was a bit alarming for them because, traditional Indian girls should perhaps, I don't know, be lawyers and accountants. But I was very fortunate that I followed my passion, because I couldn't see myself sitting in a in a bank or, that kind of world. It just wasn't me. I was creative. So after I graduated, I climbed the ladder very quickly, and that was just sheer determination and drive. You touched upon that silver spoon. I didn't have that. I'd seen my parents struggle, and I definitely did not want to be in, that kind of position. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet. My dad always instilled those values in me, that's to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. So after fashion, college, graduated, walked straight into a job, very lucky. And the market was very different then. I'm talking sort of in the late 90s, early noughties. And we were when the economy was booming. Things changed rapidly when the crash came, and the face of retail changed, and it really has over even the last decade. And the kind of roles I used to do don't exist anymore. I was a brand and buying director. And I've worked for, like you say, some of the big high street retailers. And we know recently Debenhams has gone into administration, and across the high streets, jobs are being lost. And I really think it's time for people to rethink, because retail as we know it, it's been changing for the last decade anyway, but the roles have changed. And I think it's time to retrain, relearn, and, the jobs now are going to be much more sort of digital based. And, I think that it's time for new ideas to come.
What kind of top skills would you see? Because you're an employer still. You've got a family business. What skills do you see people need most training on? Where's the skills gap?
I think that people have lost soft skills and communication skills. For me, social media has played a big part in that. I'm very much a kind of, I've been able to turn a no into a yes by picking up the phone. I've been able to connect with, I always if you want to connect with someone in an organisation, I believe go to the top. I have picked up the phone and asked to speak to CEOs and directors, and that sort of being a bit ballsy, a bit picking up the phone. And, don't get me wrong, I was quivering when I was making those calls, but, I would sort of term it that I'm going whale hunting or big fish hunting. I wanted someone to come to my events, or I wanted someone to, do something for me. And the best way was the art of communication. When I years ago, when I was in fashion retail and I wanted to, there was a job going at Marks and Spencer, the buying director, I didn't get the job. However, the CEO, Mark Berlin, I sent him a personal presentation which landed on his desk physically, and he said, "This is the best thing I've ever seen from a candidate." Obviously, he handed me over to HR, and things didn't, progress. Actually, they pulled the role, but that's not the point. It was about making yourself stand out.
I love that. That's actually practical, personal advice. I love that. Absolutely, that is brilliant, and I think that's what the viewers will want to hear more of. Look, you're also, to state the obvious, you're a woman. Okay, how's that impact you? Has it been an advantage? I assume it has. It always is.
Well, now, Alpesh, come on. Do you know what? Yes, I'm proud to be a woman, and sometimes I do believe that if you are a woman, you can get a sort of women, we're allowed to show our emotion a bit more, aren't we? We can be a little bit more, you know, charismatic and do all of those things. But and if you know how to play to that girl, I've got off parking ticket before. I was only going 32. You know, being a woman in business is challenging. When I was, again, back in fashion retail, I was, it's going about 10 years, and I was entering my first board meeting as part of one of the big sports retailer groups. I was heading up their fashion arm, young fashion arm. And when I went into my first board meeting, I was the only female, and then I was brown. I don't know what shocked them more. You know, the average age was sort of, you know, 50 plus, and I was quite young. But it was, you know, one of the things that one of the directors said to me there was, you know what, Chanda, working with you has made me realise that we need more of you. You know, you as a woman, you bring a different slant. You bring, you know, you do things maybe slightly differently, but you know, ultimately I think that there's still a lot more to do. There's not enough women, and not BAME women, on the, you know, on the boards of even in the FTSE 100 companies, let alone sort of across the board in smaller organizations.
And I guess that's where, as people, power to communicate improves. And you said those are the skills which across the board, regardless of gender, are lacking. Hopefully that will change. I mean, the change has been way too slow. I think you and I will agree with whether it's gender or ethnicity. Just picking up on that point on ethnicity, look, we're from the same Indian community. Our community, whilst our parents' generation, a lot of them came from East Africa, from Kenya, Uganda. In this country, we're quite cliquey. I think it's fair to say demographically, we sort of don't maybe perhaps intermingle as much as we should. And overlay that with what's happening with Black Lives Matter. Where can our community do more, given that we may well have worked with the Black community far more than many other ethnicities have due to our heritage?
Yeah, I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement, I'm not directly involved, but I recognise it's developed into a movement, and there's an overarching call to address the massive social injustice against Black and Asian people. But I think there needs to be a lot more. There needs to be sort of systemic change. I'm working with a group of like-minded people who are serious about making a difference. I'm putting a body together to start an organisation that can address some of these issues. But I think a lot of it starts with education, and that starts with us as parents, let alone, you know, the world out there. You know, there's a lot that needs to happen with this Black, you know, it's kind of a wake-up call, and it's maybe a lot of these conversations uncomfortable for a lot of people to have. And even, you know, our sort of parents' generation, you know, they sometimes they don't really understand. You know, I was talking to my mum the other day and saying, you know, actually, how would you like it if we were referred to as well, I don't know what the Gujarati word for brown is, but I think it's burra or something. You know, it's just a little bit how the certain terminology and things, just, you know, it's education. It's you know, a lot of it's based on ignorance, but I think that you know, in the business world especially, you know, BAME people are hugely underrepresented, and you know, if an individual or a business succeeds, everybody succeeds. Yeah. So you know, through the path of education and you know, being in leadership roles, allowing more BAME people to be in leadership roles. Now I know maybe in the city it's quite different, but in fashion retail, like I said, I was the first. When the headhunter appointed me, she said to me, Chanda, do you know that you are the first brown female to be in that kind of level of position? And I think we need to do a lot more as a community.
The visibility.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We need to call it out.
Yeah, because people often stay quiet. Just drawing up some strands of what you've said, when we look at retail, you know, they used to talk about, and the Indian community came to the UK around roughly the same time, a little bit later than the Afro-Caribbean community came to the UK, when in large numbers. People started talking about the brown pound, the power of brown people to make a difference through their pocketbook. We don't still talk about the black pound, because when you look at the statistics, it doesn't exist. The buying power doesn't exist. what can retail do? What can, I don't know, what can policies do to make sure that wealth gets distributed? That might be an unfair question because it's a huge question to ask. But there is that potential, like you rightly said, and you see it in retail, there is that potential to tap into the black pound, as it were. Maybe that will cause a voice to happen and a change to happen.
Again, it comes back to recruitment, it comes back to marketing, it comes back to, you know, really being open to embrace people of all ethnicities, but especially with this BLM movement, it's a chance, it's a real chance for companies, retailers, or any organizations to make systemic change, to do something really positive, and address the issue. I mean, there are communities, you know, you talk about the brown pound, and there are, you know, other sort of communities where, you know, the network can help each other. And I also think, you know, back to the importance of education. And if you think about, you know, our parents' generation and how much value they put on our education, and we were pushed and pushed and pushed. And I think that actually those conversations need to happen within those communities, with you know, from educational organizations to reaching out to the black communities, to the underprivileged communities, where perhaps, you know, there hasn't been that kind of drive and push from the community. I mean, I was scared, I was petrified. If I didn't do well at school in my studies, I was absolutely fearful of what my parents might say. And I don't know if that's, you know, it shouldn't be a fear, but it should be about, you know, opening the doors to education. And I think that, you know, if you look back at history, and, you know, the whole, you know, my opinion is that if with slavery, if generations have been wiped out as they were in slavery, that community does not have the resource or the knowledge or the expertise to go back to, because those generations have been wiped out. And so we, other communities, will always be ahead. And that's a big injustice, and that's something that needs to be addressed. And, you know, there are organisations now, you know, banks included, saying, okay, yeah, hands up, we benefited from slavery, so we want to help and do something to right those wrongs. And so now's their opportunity, and they need to do it with education, opportunities, money.
Yeah, and I think the more it's spoken about, not just the headlines with Lewis Hamilton every time he wins, but also just regular people like you and I talking about it, the more it's spoken about, hopefully the more it will chip away, and those in power see, well, actually, it's got to be different this time. We've got to keep on with this and not forget about it. Let me turn to faith before we have to wrap up, unfortunately. Hinduism. I'm chairman of City Hindus Network. How has faith interacted with your professional life? Is it something you leave at home? Is it compartmentalized, or do you try to interweave it through difficult times whenever you've had them?
Gosh, yeah, lots of difficult times. And in business, you would know that, you know, it's not always easy. You have ups and downs, highs and lows, and this kind of pandemic has definitely, you know, seen some difficulties for everybody. My faith is what gets me through time and time again. You know, in my times of challenge, it's my faith that, you know, comes to the forefront, and I'm stronger for it, because I have this absolute innate belief that, you know, I will be looked after, and I have, because of God. And, you know, I don't just pray in my time of need. I've got, you know, 2 young children, and I am absolutely, you know, convinced that they need to have that sort of faith and moral guidance, that moral compass, and, you know, that comes from faith. In business, I've connected with some amazing people, and, you know, you're having a business meeting. You know, I did a lot of networking, I did a lot of events, because I was thinking outside the box of how to raise the profile of my business. And, you know, I've been fortunate enough to meet some amazing people. And one of the common shared values that would often come up, because I maybe the kind of person I am, and you know, I'm quite, you know, zen and quite you know, open about talking about my faith and belief in karma, and so there would just be this connection. Now, these people were not necessarily from the Hindu faith. They could have been Christians, they could have been Buddhist, Islamic, you know, they could have been of any faith, but absolutely this connection of knowing that you want to be a better person, and that your faith, your moral compass guides you, and that's a really important thing in your personal life and in business. So I met people of similar mindset, and these people have, become friends or really championed my cause or wanted to help. People want to help people. I'm a true believer that human nature is to be good and to be kind. And it's a natural way to want to help others. But when you have this shared connection of faith, there's an unwritten, unspoken understanding with one another that just helps guide through. And people's goodness, it can get you a long way. And I have to thank my parents for instilling those values in me, and I'll in turn instill them in my children, I hope.
Chanda, thank you. I think you'll agree with me that whilst we might not have been born with silver spoons in our mouth, we've been incredibly privileged with the surroundings that we've had, parents and so on. Now, it's all been a very serious interview up to this point. We've got to sadly end it. We will, when we do the next one, and it's always common to tease these things, when we do the next one, we'll share with the audience the partying till sunrise we did in Ibiza at Pasha and in Las Vegas. But for now, we'll just end on that note. Chanda, thank you very much for being part of this Elevator series. Thank you.
Absolute privilege. Thank you so much, Alpesh. And of course, if anybody wants to connect about women in business, Black Lives Matter, or my thing that I'm working on, then obviously connect directly with me on LinkedIn or via you, Alpesh. And City Hindus, great to be part of this network.